Hey everybody, welcome. Happy Friday. The weekend's finally here, and that means we're doing another live stream. Today we're going to be doing part 8 of our Parchment World Map series. In the last episode, part 7, we actually finished up the biomes by adding in the planes. That's both natural and fantasy. In this episode, we're going to be covering all things biomes. That means what kind of stamp should I use? What's the starting location? What and where? Legends, travel and roads, lore, and fog of war. So we're going to be covering a lot of issues, a lot of things in this particular episode. So keep your pants on. It's going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. Hey, Typher Zero, glad that you are here. All right, so let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right in. Now, if you're at the stage in your map where you are finished with all of your biomes and all of the natural features of your map and you're ready to go to the POIs, one of the first things you should do is select every single thing on the map and lock it. The way to do that is if you go to the right panel here, you'll notice that you can't see my mouse, but you can see the right panel there as I'm going up and down. There's a little button right here that says select all. Once everything is selected, you'll see a little hamburger menu, that little yellow button there. I'm going to click that, and then there should be lock selection. Right here, lock selection. And now, when I'm trying to place my points of interest, my labels, banners, my roads with the path or line tool, I won't accidentally select anything. So that's the first thing that you should do. So that way you're not, oh, I accidentally selected that. I got to press escape and then select the thing again. That's going to be extremely helpful. Select everything in the right panel with that select all. Then hamburger menu, lock everything. Okay. So that's their first step. The second thing that you should do is keep in mind that you're going to have 2 copies of a map at this point. The first copy of the map is going to be what your players see, right? The second copy of the map is going to be what you, the DM, sees. And that means it's going to have a different type of key with all the different kind of icons that might represent your DM's notes, like encounters, boss battles, things like that. So you want 2 copies of your map. We're going to start, and we're only going to do the player's map, because once you finish the player's version, you can start building on top of that. So this is the player version, and then you would go and build on top of that once you finished it. So let's say that we had finished this and added all my points of interest for the player version. Then you would copy this as a clone. So you would go up to the hamburger menu at the top left corner here, and then there's a little button that says save as clone. Once you click that, the prompt will come up and you'll be able to change the name of that. That's what you're going to want to do, okay? So that way you have the 2 versions, the player version and the DM version. So let's do that next step. And that is that you want to pick a starting location in which your players will begin the campaign, right? And for me, when I look carefully at the map, the way that I kind of decide that is kind of choosing a location that I feels best for me. So what I do is I look at a location that already exists. So I just move in right here, just kind of look at everything where it looked good. Like this area right here seems very hazard and dangerous. It seems like a bad place to start for a level 1 player at a campaign. So instead, you should probably pick something that's a little bit more pleasant, like maybe up here in this Fey area, maybe this nice plain right here with some trees. There's this forest area. Maybe we're going to put elves over here. But I think this spot right here works the best. It's just a regular green plain. There's not a lot going on here. This is going to be our starting location right here. I think that's going to be a good location. I'll go ahead and change up the settings on these. This is going to be a good place to start. And one thing that I'll notice about this location is that it has access to multiple things. Like I can go down this way into this area over here. I can go into this kind of dried out lakes over here, or I can move into this area like this. So the starting location is going to be something that's not too difficult for level 1, and that is if you're starting at level 1. Obviously, if your players that are start a higher level, you can start in a different location, but for level 1, start one that's easy. Start where there's obviously options for your players to go. I personally don't like to landlock my players like on a very small island, and then the only way to get off the island is to take a boat or some kind of ship. Those are really expensive, and so I'll usually start in a location where there's access to a lot of places and it's a larger landmass, so that way they're not landlocked. So that's one of the couple things that I'll do. This is a good location here. So that's The step is picking your location. After you've chosen the location, then you need to decide what kind of stamps and where to place them. And there's a lot of different stamps that you can kind of choose from here. I'll give you kind of examples just to kind of see what we're working with here. But right here, you have some very basic, crude icons here. These are just basic icons, right? There's no details or flourishings or anything like that. You've got these more simple icons. I'm using elves as an example, but they go through the various races: human, orc, dwarves, and elves. So they have different variations. There's more simple, there's a little bit more design, there's architecture to it. Then there's also these more detailed ones that have way more detail to them than those more simple ones. And then there's these much older icons, which actually are quite nice. At first, I didn't really care for these because they're older, but what's nice about these ones is that you can actually change the hue of these ones. So if you want to change them to different colors, maybe you want to change it to a color green, just bump the saturation all the way up and then change the hue with the color adjustments. That's going to be very, very helpful. So that is one nice thing about these older ones. Otherwise, I'll be using these. And one thing you'll notice about all of these icons, besides that last one there, is that they all have what's called a clipping mask. Okay, and a clipping mask is going to pick up whatever's on the FG layer. Okay, that's anything made with the add mode of the mask tool. So if I place this stamp right here and I go right and I put it over here, you'll notice it's picking up whatever texture is made with the add mode of the mask tool. So you notice it's picking up that red there, it's picking up the green, it's picking up the yellow there. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're placing these. Okay. Now, the way that I kind of decide what kind of icon to use depends on kind of two important things. One is going to be function, and the other one is going to be artistic or aesthetic. And the functional part is how many points of interest do you have on your map? If you have got hundreds of points of interest, that means tons of villages and little tiny points of interest. If you have a lot, you probably want to go with crude basic icons. And the reason why is because once you have that many locations, you start to clutter the map, and maybe simple icons work better. But also because with that number of locations, and especially if you're labeling them with banners, text, it starts to flood the map a little bit, and it starts to hide the beauty of your map. Okay, so if you're going with thousands of different locations, crude basic icons are your best bet. The only thing that you can do with that I recommend is if you are going to go with crude basic icons for all your locations, maybe the most important locations can be a simple or a detailed icon, so that way they pop out from regular locations like a regular village or a tower, and that way your players know, like, hey, this isn't a regular location that we're walking into, since it's got something different than a regular crude basic icon, right? That way your players kind of know, like, this is something different. So these are kind of things to factor in. If you have a lot of locations, use the crude basic icons. If you only have just a couple locations on the map, or maybe a couple dozen, then you can start using more detailed icons or symbols to put on the map. So find that helpful. So if you are going to do that route of where you're going to use all these basic crude icons, my recommendation is that you also use a legend. Right? And there's a lot of different ways that you can approach a legend, but the way that I approach the legend is to put it in a location that is not going to hide any landmass. So like this corner right here, notice how there's nothing going on right here? This is a good location right here for a legend. Maybe it's too big. You can always bring the scale down, or if you don't like that particular legend, you can use different ones. Like you could maybe use like this kind of thing for a legend, or use this variation for a legend. Maybe you want to put it here. Usually in locations where there isn't much going on, it's just land, is the best locations to put legends, okay? And then the way that I put a legend together is pretty simple. Let's just say that I go with this one. And what I would do is I would establish what each icon represents. So let's place them down first. We'll start here. This one right here would represent your basic village. Perhaps this one would represent, make it a little bit bigger. Maybe this one will represent like a city or a town, right? And then maybe you want to show, let's just say that one was a town. Let's say that this one is a city, and that this one is a capital. To make sure that it sticks out, we'll make it that. Or maybe I also want to show like a fort. Maybe I want to show a temple. Maybe I want to have like a tower. Okay, so this is how you your set up your legend. All the different types of locations are going to be put there. And then what you can do is you just lock the legend so you don't accidentally select it. If I select every single one of these icons, if I go to that menu up here and I go to Align Distribute and go to Center Horizontally, it will immediately line these up like that. So now that they're nicely lined up like that, and I'll go ahead and just kind of move them so there's some space. And what I do is I'll bring them like this, just so that way there's enough space in between them, because I want enough room to create a legend, something that says legend at the top here. So if I go right here, put in my text, let's go with our black color for now, and I'll just type in text, type in legend, and let's go ahead and remove the outline, and we'll choose a black color for now. If you wanted to get the same kind of color as that brown, you would go with somewhere within the reds and kind of get down to the darker brownish color. And there you have your legend. I would make the legend part a bigger text and then make the smaller text right here like this. Then just type in village. And what I'll do is I'll put this text right in front of each one of these like this, and then I can just select it and then edit it to fit what I want. So now I have village, I've got a town, city, capital. This will be either a fort or fortress. Let's go with a fortress. This is going to be a temple. And this will be a tower. Or it could be a ruin, whichever one you want. A yawer. I don't know anything about yowers, but so making a legend is pretty easy. One also thing that you could do to separate this piece right here is to simply just take a line like this and then just go across like this, and this will separate the title of the legend from the text here. And of course you can go ahead and line these back up again because I did move them. Line and distribute horizontally. You can do the same thing to these. Align and distribute horizontally. And then we could also line these up individually as well. Align and distribute vertically. Align and distribute vertically. I'm just going to do this to every single one of these. And this will make sure that everything is nice and lined up nicely, because it looks much more professional when you do it this way. So make sure everything's lined up. A little bit of a lag there. Okay, just going to keep doing it to every single one of them. All right, I think that looks good. Let's unlock the legend. You can't seem to find it in your long list. I found it right there. And then once you've selected everything, create group and just call it legend. So making a legend is not complex, pretty easy stuff. It's just picking what you want as the base of the legend to be, label the legend, or it could also be called a key, and then you place down all the symbols or icons, and then you label each one. And this is the easiest way to do points of interest on a map. So if you're feeling very artistically inclined, you don't want to come up with all these different compositions of stamps for your locations, or because you want it to be more to scale, because the truth is, if you wanted it to look more realistic, if that's what you wanted, then you would put little icons, because in truth, if you wanted to fit it to scale, all of those things would be so small you'd never be able to see them. That's why those little crude icons work great. Okay, and so now you have that. But let's say that you let's go ahead and do the starting point. I'll just go ahead and hide this for now. We're not going to be using that, and I'll lock it. And I'll go ahead and hide these locations as well. Let's go type in POI. I believe it's POI choices. There it is. I'll go ahead and remove this. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and quickly save because I did 77 changes. And we're going to go ahead and start with our starting location. And we're going to talk about travel and roads and how exactly that I put that together. And we're going to incorporate lore and fog of war as well. Okay, and then we're going to start, after I've gone through all of that stuff, then we'll start placing down all of the location stuff. But let's start with our starting area. Now, I think because I want to show both detailed icons and crude, so that way I can show you both in the same stream. So I'll have my starting point, like where the game starts. So I'll go into the thing here, and I'm just going to choose these icons right here. I think these work great. And we're going to do our starting village. And I'm going to find a good location. I think just right in the center of all this grass, right about here, is the right point. Now, once you get to here, now we have to talk about distance. Now, there's some ways that I approach travel here, now that I put the first point, because now travel works from one point to the other. Now we can just discuss that travel point. Now, in the map, what I had was that I had each one of these squares represented 250 miles, okay? So that means, now if I follow that logic of the 250 miles per square, that means that about an average human being could walk anywhere between about 5 and 20 miles, depending on their condition and how in shape they are, but that's the average if you were to average it out, right? If I was to follow reality, that means it would take multiple weeks for players to travel from one end of a square to the other. Now that might be maybe too realistic and not very exciting for your players. And so what I end up doing is I'll set an entirely different scale for travel. And instead of using miles, how many miles between A and point B, instead I'll use days instead. And then this way I have a separate scale for travel, and it's just easier because my rule when it comes to putting down rules about travel and combat, I like to simplify everything. Simplification just makes it easier for you as a DM, because you as a DM has a lot of work to do. So we originally used the 250 miles for to show how big we wanted our mountain ranges and stuff, but that same logic maybe might not work for travel. So we'll set an entirely different scale, something that's similar to the 250 miles per square, so it's not too far off, but also we're going to stretch it a little bit. It's fantasy. The way that I'll do is I'll simplify it by saying that one of these squares actually represents 5 days of travel. That's highly simplified. That means that your players are probably moving anywhere to around 70 to 80 miles per day. So that's quite a stretch there, but that also just makes it easier, because if I wanted my players to go from one location to the other and it was 2 squares away, that means it would take like 3, 4, 5 weeks to get to that location, and I might not have enough content in between those 2 locations for my players to deal with random locations or whatever. And so simplification is key. So I'll pick the location. I'm going to leave the grid on just so that it can work with me. You can change the icon to where the very first location can be not be an icon because it's the first location. So we could choose something else. Like what I could use is I'm not going to use any other of these symbols except for this one. So maybe I'll just use this to represent the start of where my players go, and then everything else from there will be an icon besides capitals and things like that. So I'll go ahead and choose this icon right here. I'm going to have this represent the home, and then from here I can start representing locations. So let's say that if I wanted my players to travel 5 days to get to a certain location, then I can put it here on the grid. If it's 3 days, it could be here. If it's 1 day, I can move it closer, right? So I'm going to put a series of other locations for the players to add in, and I want them to be at least 2 or 3 days travel away, and I want them to be more than just little villages, right? Because if it's just all villages in a starting region, then that means I have a lot of content. I have to make a blueprint for each one of these villages. I have to put NPCs. I have to stack it up. So what I'll do is I'll place maybe 1 temple, 1 tower, maybe a ruin, and then maybe another village, right? And that way there's a variety of things that players can do within the immediate area. So I'll put 1 village that's maybe close by. I'll put that over here where it goes closer over to there. And then the other ones that I'll choose, and I'll put that legend back on so that I can remember where things are, just to make sure. We'll go back, we'll type in legend. I didn't really need to hide it. That was kind of my mistake, but I'm going to leave it on anyway, so that this way I can kind of select it and remember the icons. All right, so 1 village. I also want to add in a temple, so I think that would be a good idea. Let's throw in a temple. Let's put in this one. Let's put a temple. I'll just try to snap the grid off. Let's put a temple right here on the base of the water. That would make a great encounter. Maybe there's like a ruined temple or some special shrine that's right on the water. This makes for a great encounter map. So when players walk to that space, I'll go ahead and move this here. I also want to add in maybe like a fort or fortress. And a great location for forts and fortresses are going to be some place that's easily defensible, right? So I could place that maybe right here on top in the mountains, right up here. Maybe it's on top of a hill where it can be better defended, on top of a hill here, up on top of the mountain. I kind of like the mountain space. I think that looks good. There's a nice fortification. Players can move to that. Let's go ahead and add in one more. Let's go add in a ruin. And I'll choose the ruin in a different location. Right here we have a lot of flat. Let's go put it in this hilly area. So in between these three hills, surrounded by these three hills, is a nice ruin. That's going to allow for your players to have something else to explore. Then from there, I'll start creating routes or roads. And there are different ways to kind of go about doing roads. But the way that I set it up is pretty simple. I'm going to start from the home, the starting location, which is right here. And I'm going to create a route that travels to each location. And you can change the line style to represent different types of routes, right? Maybe you want one to be a footpath. Maybe one will be a major road. Another one might be just a trail that leads somewhere, right? So you can use varying widths and line styles to kind of represent that. All right, so I'll go ahead and change the stroke size because I want it to fit the right size. That's a little too small. Let's make it big enough to where it's viewable. I'm going to make it white because it contrasts. It pops out. Let me zoom out real quick and you can see it. There's no mistaking that this is a path. You can see it. So I've set that. Now I can start putting some roads together. Don't worry about changing the different paths and styles yet. We'll put down all the different, all one path and then change them as need be. So maybe we'll go ahead and have this route go from the starting point. And what I'll do is I'll do like rivers. I'll have this meandering. And the reason why I do this meandering is because it's going to represent that there are obstacles like hills, cliffs, gulches. There's always terrain that gets in the way. And that's why there's not a straight line. Let me undo that. That's why there's not a straight line that goes like this, unless it's just a completely flat terrain. Now, if you wanted to show that it was completely flat, have that straight line. If you wanted to show that there was some change in the elevation and change in the terrain, then have the route kind of snake like that, okay? And then from that location, I'll put another one leading up to this location like that. And then I can have it maybe branch off and go to here, and then maybe create another one that goes here. So two separate routes, and then maybe one that connects to right here like this. There we go. So you have your starting point, which is going to be right here. It's completely identifiable because it's just a simple icon, or it's a little more detailed icon. Then we have our ruin or tower, a village, our temple, and our fortress. Now, when I am doing this, the next step that I want to talk about is labeling. How is it that I approach labels? Me personally, I don't label every single thing on my map. You don't need to do that, especially on your player version, okay? You don't have to. Maybe for your DM version of the map, you can label every single thing, but I generally don't label every single thing. I generally will label things within only the starting area or the main place or major locations in the starting region, whatever it might be. So let's say that it's a starting village. Let's go ahead and use white text. That way it will kind of match a little bit. I'm going to keep a theme. I have white roads. Why not have white text as well? That way I'm sticking with a theme. We're going to want to give that, we're just going to call it home, but whatever location you want. If you have a hard time with figuring out what to call a location, my trick is pretty simple. I think about the terrain. I think about the landscape. I think about all of those areas. And then I kind of think about, okay, they're in a plain. Maybe it has a name, a special name. Maybe there's a special language that the species that live in this area has. So maybe you want to have it where there's multiple syllables. Maybe you want to come up, maybe you're basing it off of an English type of, or maybe it's from France or whatever. Then I'll start using French words and kind of changing them up, or maybe Old English words and kind of changing them up. whenever I'm thinking about it, I usually just think about the areas in which, don't worry about the Silk Song. I can totally understand that. I have been playing it a lot too. I totally understand. But when it comes with coming up with idea, there's also name generators that you can come up with. There's all these different things that you can use to kind of help you, because I do know that labeling is actually quite challenging. I'm going to go ahead and also add an outline to it as well, because I noticed that there is some, that the white might not work so much on snow. And so what's helpful is to add a thick line to it like this. And then that way it's not difficult to see. So I can put a little thick line. And then when I step away, it shouldn't be too difficult to see. But if I had to give it a name, you could call it something like Oberith. We'll call it Oberith. I usually just come up with random stuff. It's not something that I spend a lot of time with. I don't want to drive myself crazy with trying to come up with all the labels. So generally I'll use like a name generator. If it's something specific because I have a special language, then I won't use it. So it's up to you on how you want to go about doing it. And again, I'll only label important things like this little village right here where I start. That's the only thing I need to label here, unless it's really important, like maybe it's a location where your players have to go to accomplish something. Normally, I don't lock encounters or NPC or locations to pin it to a certain location, because sometimes your players will go in the opposite direction. So what I'll do is I'll have an encounter or an important NPC. I'll be able to shift them and move them around to each location as need be. I will never lock certain things. So that way it's not, because your players are always going to do something different than what you expect them to do. Don't lock in locations, lock in events, encounters in certain locations, because your players are going to go in a totally different direction. Have them open and fluid so that that way they don't go to this temple right here, but they need a certain item, and they might never go to that place. I'll change up an item or an NPC and move it over to this location if that's where they decide to, okay? It's always important to be able to shift and move things around. So that's what I can tell a little about labeling. You don't have to label everything, just certain locations. Let's quickly talk about Fog of War, and then we'll go into a little bit more in detail on lore, and then we're going to fill out this location. I just want to cover all of these things here first instead of changing them all out throughout these different episodes, so that way I can cover all of it. Let's talk about Fog of War. So we don't actually have a built-in Fog of War feature, but that's okay. You don't need it. I see a little blinking with the editor here. I'm going to quickly save it. It might be because it's a little hot in here. It's somewhere around 82 degrees in here, so it's a little toasty. I'm going to quickly save. I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to show you how to do Fog of War. And you're going to find this helpful because a lot of people have been asking me, how exactly did I do Fog of War? This thing's going a little slow. I'm going to, there it goes. Just a little bleep. Let that set up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. I noticed that the UI is kind of blinking and glitching a little bit. If that happens, just save your map. If you absolutely cannot save, it's not working, cancel the save and try saving again. If that ultimately fails, you're going to want to do an offline backup, which is super easy to do. If you just go over to here, you're going to do save offline backup. And then it's going to let you back it up. You'll label it, and then you can just do that offline backup. That's going to be very helpful, especially if you're unable to save, okay? All right, so let's talk about Fog of War. And this will change, by the way, when 2.0 comes out, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to lock it so I don't accidentally select anything. But actually, I'm going to undo that. I do want those things selectable. What I'll do is I'll go up to the brush tool right here, brush tool. You're going to go to top layer. That means on top of everything. You're going to switch over to color, and you're going to switch to black. Okay, I'm going to place my mouse right here. I just want to remember where this is. I'm going to go to fill. And it's going to fill everything with that. Then you're going to switch over to erase like this. And then here, you can erase certain areas. So I'm going to go and memorize where that spot is. It's right there. And now I can use this Fog of War. Go like this, just kind of paint in the areas that I want, however big you want the Fog of War to be. And then when I zoom in, you'll notice that I can only see this area right here, and that way my players can experience that Fog of War. And I do this when I'm working on my map. Okay, so this is very helpful. I'll never do fog of war on my DM's note map. I'll just do it on my player map. So now you know how to do fog of war. Very, very helpful trick. I'll also be sure to clip this out so that people know how to do fog of war. Let's go back here. I'm going to go ahead and just go erase, and I'm going to go click the erase button, and if I go clear, it will clear everything. So now you know how to do fog of war. Pretty easy stuff. Okay, so now that I've kind of given you the breakdown for all of these different things, now we can start working on lore and start putting things together. Okay, so I've put this together here. I've got my little town here. So when I do lore, lore is all about the terrain. This is a simple plain. There's nothing much to here. So with my plains, you can have things like maybe there are these gods or creatures that walk at the plains at night. Maybe they're called night walkers. They walk at night, and maybe they collect the souls of the dead. So that's some nice lore here. Now that we have an idea about our gods and our supernatural, maybe the people that live on these plains worship the night walkers. Maybe they give them tidings or offerings on graves, so that way when the night walker goes to take the spirit to the afterlife, there is this food or these offerings that pleases the night spirit, and that will kind of decide maybe where they go. If there is a hierarchy in your afterlife, maybe like a place of good or bad, or if you even have an afterlife, maybe the greater the gift or the greater the offering, the greater the location. I don't know. That's up to you to decide, but that's some lore that we can work with. We could also have it to where this location right here is on the water right here. So maybe we can add in some lore for this region over here outside of this plane right here. Maybe there's like a drowned god or a drowned king that lived in this temple right here. But you'll notice that this spot over here, there was a series of dried lakes right here. Let's go ahead and use that lore. Maybe many years ago, this whole region was just flooded with water. These series of lakes and streams that connect these lakes were the remains of that water. Much of the water got soaked up, it got evaporated, maybe there was some magical event, and so maybe we want the drowned king or the spirit of the drowned king to be in this puddle. If it's too close, we can move that location over to here. Maybe it would look better on this larger location right here, and maybe we can just put a simple ruin here for your players to explore. And then we can go ahead and select this line, and we'll create a line that kind of connects this town over to here. So right here we have a drowned king or drowned god. That will be helpful. And maybe that's going to be where a boss battle is going to take place. That's not the first time I've heard that, first time chatter. People do call me Bob Ross. I've heard that. And that's a big compliment because I love Bob Ross. There are no mistakes, just happy accidents. So now we have that set up there. We've added some lore. We have a drowned god or a drowned king. We have this water area that was once flooded and now dried up. We have the night walker in this area here. What's cool is if maybe you want to add something to that lore, you could have maybe add in some symbols, like maybe the night walkers are actually unicorns or some kind of creature, and maybe they touch the gravestone or the dig site or whatever with their horn, and then it captures the spirit in the horn, and they maybe travel off to wherever. So you want to show that kind of lore. Maybe I want to bump up the contrast here. Maybe I want to change, let's bring the brightness all the way to saturation up, bring the contrast, and then get some more white. And then maybe I want to have a series of like night walkers that are coming through. Let's go ahead and put one here, copy, paste, another one here, copy, paste, put another one here. I'm going to put them all in this region. Let's actually put one right here, one here, bring the size up a little bit more on this one. There we go. Okay. Just to kind of show the lore of that area, I'll just kind of put in these little tiny unicorns right here. These represent my night walkers at night. Again, they collect the souls of the dead. So that's nice there. Let's go ahead and keep adding in some lore here. One thing that I want to show around this drowned god region is I want to show that there was some kind of life that was here and then it kind of died out. So what I'll do is you'll never stop adding in more terrain stuff. So what I'll do is I think I'll add in some trees and I'll add in some dead trees. I want to show that it's a crypt. It's the drowned god. It's a tragic tragedy. They died. And to show that death, what I'll do is I'll play down some undead or some dead trees. And to make sure that I have the scale right, I'll go ahead and just put it up against a tree or a cactus or whatever that's close by. And then I just make sure that the scale is correct. So I'll go ahead and just go through here. I think this scale looks right, about 45. That looks fine. And then I'm going to go over to this area right here. I'm going to put some dead trees that are going around, that are kind of ringing around this, just to give this point of interest, to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'll add in these dead trees here, and now it rings around it, and that looks kind of nice. Maybe I also want to throw in something in the middle of the lake, like maybe that ruin is on top of a hill, or maybe if it's collapsed, it's in the water. Let's go ahead and take a look at our stamp options here. We'll go through it here. Let's see here. Maybe I want to pick a special icon for this region. This altar icon could be interesting. Maybe if you wanted to show that there's combat, you can use X. These are more for the DM notes, really, honestly, I would say. But I do want to show that the location is special without having to change the icon. So maybe just ringing it with the trees actually is a good idea. Maybe I'll rotate this a little bit to make it look like it's kind of in the water a little bit. Like this, there we go. Cool. Now I have my drowned god just to kind of show it's a dead area. That's kind of helpful. Let's go ahead and add in a couple more points of interest. For instance, maybe I want to add in let's add in another ruin or town here. Let's go ahead and have some on the outskirts of where all these lakes are. So maybe a nice location over here on this side would be good. And then we'll go ahead and create our roads that kind of lead to it. Travel to here. Remember to add some curves in your roads to make sure that it kind of shows that there's different variation. And then let's also add another village in here. You notice that there's a lot of travel here. It's going to take several weeks to get just over to this area right here if we're following the logic of the days of travel here, just to kind of be helpful here. So let's go ahead and add in another village. Let's go put a village in a special location right here in this dried up bed right here. And we could say that this just wasn't any type of water, that it was some of the ocean. So it was a mix between rainwater and some salt water. And so maybe this is like a salt, this is a salt pan in that little river, in that lake, dried up lake, and that's maybe that village does mining and grabs the salt from that area. So nice location to put it right there in the terrain. And I can add it. Remember, the lore comes from the terrain. So because I have that dried up lake right there, because it's a salt pan, we can add some lore. So it's a village that does salt, or maybe it's a special type of magical salt, whatever it might be. And maybe because it's such a long bit of travel, I should probably add something in between there and here. So I pick an icon that kind of represents a ruin or a temple or a tower or whatever it might be. And then I can place that other location down. In fact, I should add an extra icon to represent a tower. There is this tower icon here. Here's a tower icon right here. This might work. It's kind of a simple icon, and I'll make sure to add it to the legend. But I'll put a tower right there, and I think I'll also add a hill to it because towers are more defensible when they're on a higher location. So let's go ahead and use a small hill. Let's go ahead and use this one right here. It's got a nice curve to it. And I'll go ahead and place that right there. And then I'll go ahead and place this icon on top of that, go up one layer. And then I have this tower icon just right on top of there. And in this way, players have something to interact with before they get to that village there. So I'll go ahead and connect this, go through here, connect that one, and then I'll go through and then connect this one. when I'm putting together my points of interest, I try to make sure that there's not too much travel. I don't want players to get bored with many, many weeks of travel and then all these encounters and all the stuff to have to deal with. So when it comes to long-term travel, I try to avoid that unless it plays some important role in the story or the campaign. And because it's just rather boring for players, at least my players don't care for a lot too many travel. So I try to fit things in between major points of interest so that the players have something to interact with. Maybe there's a tower with some bandits that they can clean out. Maybe there's a wizard there and they want to just get some more levels and get some loot, whatever it might be. I try to add in lots of different little locations in between so that your players have options. I don't want to limit it. I don't have one road leading to one ultimate location. I have many, many roads branching off from maybe the home or that Oberith location, and then that way your players have something to do. So we'll go up into this location here where we at the time, 41, tons of time. Let's go ahead and add in all the villages at once to get them out of the way. And it's always important for me because this is multiple, you're going to see that there's multiple land masses here, multiple continents. I'm going to want to make sure that I have some kind of coastal town that will allow me to travel from one place to the other. And the great locations for those are closest to that other landmass. So I want to put a town right or a village right here so that way people can travel, and I'll put another one right here. That way there is a clear way of travel to go from here to here, right? And I'm going to do that, follow that same logic with my other locations as well, because I have another landmass right here. I want to make sure that players can travel from that. So I want to maybe put one over here and then maybe put another one right here. That way there's locations. Make sure that travel from one place to the other. Let's also put another one right here. A nice little village just right on the tip on that coastal village. And then we'll put another one down here, closest on this point right here. There we go. Now we have clear locations that allow players to travel from one continent to the other. And I like to get the villages just out of the way when it comes to travel to get from one end of the continent. What I'll do from here, now that I've kind of done most of this area, is I'll just finish off the rest of the stuff. But what I'll do is I'll start throwing in some major locations. So I'll remove this one right here and we'll use a more detailed one to represent that location. So I'll pick an icon that might work better for that. And I'm going to try not to use too much variation. So what I'll do is I'll go and expand all my assets, and I'll go through and just kind of look through all my options and kind of pick which I think will be the best one here. I kind of like this stone monolith right here. This is going to work perfect. I'll go ahead and use that. I'm going to scale it up. It's going to be a little bigger, and that's okay, but there's a major event taking place here. There's going to be a battle for the Ruin God, so I'll put that there. We have our major town there. Let's go ahead and look at what other locations I might want to put down. They're going to be major locations that are going to be important. Like maybe there is, let's see, I'm going to go through my options here. Maybe there's an important shrine as well that's in this area that my players need to get to, like maybe a sea shrine. And I'll put this in a location where there's not a lot going on. Notice along this coastline here, there's not a lot going on. So maybe I'll put an icon right here. Maybe this represents an important shrine. I'm going to put it next to the sea, and that's going to help me with understanding the lore of this shrine. It's next to the sea, so maybe it worships like a god or goddess of salt or the sea. Maybe it has tide witches, maybe, or tide hags, or maybe tide mages that read the tides to gain favoritism for sailing or for getting fish or whatever. So remember, lore, it's not hard to figure out once you've already have the terrain, work with the land. That's where lore come from. So I have this nice shrine right here. I want to add a little bit, excuse me, a little more to it, because it kind of just seems that it just sticks there and there's nothing else going on there. So maybe I want to have something special lined up with the shrine. Like maybe there are these important locations that players need to go to gather some kind of resource to get into this shrine. Maybe it's locked. So maybe I'll put like a series of these locations right here, and your players will have to gather a resource or talk to an NPC or something to access this location. So we'll go ahead now and just go ahead and place in our things here, and I'll go ahead and just place this in, loop it, and I'll have it connect to here like this, and then I won't worry about connecting those other locations there. But sometimes I'll make it to where my players can't get into a certain location without doing these prerequisites first. So you could have like 2 or 3 locations. Maybe I can just put 3. That would kind of make it a little bit easier. Your players would have to be involved with maybe these 3 locations. You could put them on the path so that way your players don't have to deal with backtracking. You could do that. Maybe when they stop at each one of these locations, they pick up an artifact or they talk to an NPC or whatever that allows them access to get into this location. And whenever I also put a location, I like to add in a little bit of terrain. Maybe we could add in some trees here as well, because a POI by itself looks odd, but the way that you blend it in with your terrain is by adding some trees, right? So put some trees in front of it, put some trees behind it, put some trees around here like this, and that will give it a little bit more interesting, right? When you throw down some terrain with it. So put some terrain right here. Maybe I'll have maybe just a couple trees right here. Let's maybe put some trees around this town right here. That looks nice. And then let's see here. Let's go ahead and connect these routes. So we'll go ahead and connect this route here. Another great place to put roads are along coastlines, right? It's easy now to follow a route when it follows along the shore, right? So if I go ahead and create a route that just follows all along the shore, like this, and it will lead to that location. Let's go ahead and just take a step back and see what we've done in our first location. Where are we at for time? 47, we're doing good. Let's go ahead and just take a step back, and you can see all that we've done. So quite a bit going on here. Let's go ahead and add in a couple more locations to the map. Like maybe I want to add another ruin down here at the bottom. Notice that I have nothing going on down here. So let's just throw in a rando ruin right there, just so that players have something to work with, to play with. We'll go ahead and loop it like this, create this really windy path that kind of just leads right to it. And so most of our starting area has a lot of what we need. I'm not going to worry about adding in these icons here, and I'll probably change up this icon so that way it's matching up better. So what I'll do is I'll go back here and we'll look for some structures here that will work better. I just want to make sure that all of the stuff kind of matches. That way it just kind of looks a little better. Let's go ahead and use one of these ones here. I think since we're just starting in a basic village, why don't we just use this simple icon right here? And I'll make it a little bit bigger because it's the starting location. And this way it kind of matches in. Oh, you know what I noticed? It doesn't have a clipping mask to it. Oh, no, it does have a clipping mask. Okay, cool. We'll place that there. Okay, and I'm not sure if I like the black outline around it. I think I'm just going to go with white. There we go. Let's go ahead and save all these changes. And then we'll do a couple more locations. And then in the next episodes, we'll pretty much be doing what we did here, all the same thing. Now, if you guys don't want me to do this for every single episode, you notice that little error popped up right there. Don't panic. Just close it out. Make sure the map has been saved, and then just refresh the page, okay? We are doing some changes to the editor to prepare for the 2.0 release, so expect some lags, expect some bugs. If you have any problems with updating your map, don't worry about that. Send a support ticket. Make sure to include, make a clone of the problematic map that's not upgrading, or maybe there's a bug with missing assets. I'm having a couple bugs with missing assets on mine. If that happens, just let us know in customer support, and then also make a clone of the map, and then make sure to include the link of the clone to the map. And just so you know, you don't need to make the map public. What you should do is make the clone, open it up, copy and paste the URL in the address bar, and then that way you don't have to make your map public. And then we'll go ahead and direct to a developer, and they're going to look at it. Just know that it might take a little time for us to address all of the tickets because of the errors that are taking place and the lag that's taking place with this shift. So just be patient with us. We appreciate that. So let's go ahead and add in our last bits of little locations here. We've done that salt flat and this little plane here. We've done this plane here. Let's go ahead and add the last bits of locations. Let's add another village right here. I think right here in between these two mountains is a great location for a village, right before you go into another biome or into another area is a great place. So that way you have a village that takes you to start, and that way you can talk to the people, get the lore, you can get talk to an NPCs, you can get supplies you might need for a different location. That's why it's always important to place villages there as well. Let's also put another village right here as we move into a whole new location right here as we go into a new biome here as well. So that way we have those locations. Let's go ahead and put down the path here. Let's go ahead and just have it go through here like this. And we'll have it move its way up to here like this. And this one right here will move its way to here like that. There we go. So those are also great places to put villages, towns, cities, or capitals, or whatever it might be. One thing we've not done for this area, though, is put in a capital, right? Let's just say that this is a nation, then we probably should put some kind of capital of some kind. Maybe we'll replace this village right here with a capital of some kind. And if we're going to make it a capital, then we want to use something special, right? We could use this icon right here, this one right here, this big one right here, whatever it is. If it's going to be a capital, then I should make it an interesting icon. Let's make sure that it scales up. Because it's a capital, we want it to be a little bit bigger, right? So we'll place that right there. Let's go put it up a layer so that it's above the paths. There we go. And I'll go ahead and place this so we have a capital right there. And of course, if it's a capital, I probably want to label it. So I'll probably put a label on that one as well. Let's call it Sadara. Oopsie. I'm just coming up with rando names, nothing special. We'll put Sadara, a capital there. You could also label this drowned king if you wanted to, like Ruin of the Drowned King. You could do that. If it's too much text, don't worry about it. If it's your DM, if it's your DM map with your DM symbols and stuff, I would put like a little icon like this over it that kind of represents that there's going to be combat here. Just put a little icon like that over there. That way then there's combat there. If there's other locations where, you know, there's going to be an encounter, just use this nice skull and bone texture or this stamp and just kind of place it wherever you might be for notes. There are some other couple things that you can add. I also like to add in a camp of some kind. Players need places to rest, right? And so adding in official camp spots are great, and they're also helpful to have great encounters, right? Maybe you're being tracked by a group of bandits or a horde of or a war band of orcs, or maybe your players just need a place to rest and recoup. Great locations for campsites are like where roads kind of cross together. Those are good locations to place roads. Let me select every single one of these paths. Select all from the style. Let's go down. There we go, down a layer. And then I can just go ahead and place a camp right there if I want. Those are good places to put them. Another great place to put camps is if they've traveled a long distance to get somewhere and they've been traveling for a while and they're feeling weak. So if you have a long stretch of travel, put in a series of campsites along that long stretch. So let's say this is that long stretch right here. This is like several weeks of travel. Put several campsites along the path so that your players have some place to recoup, talk about strategy, figure out where they're going. Those are always nice to add little campsites. I'll just go ahead and put this one right here at this crossroads. That way they have some place to rest before they make the decision to go from one location to the other. So lots of cool things that we can do. All right, so I think that covers the basics of it. There are a couple options that we can do from here. We can do in future episodes where we just start placing down more locations and going into lore, I can do this off screen and just make it time lapses and add it to it. I'll leave it up to you. What we'll do is we'll just have people mention this in the comments on YouTube. So I'll make sure to upload this to YouTube, leave comments. This part of the map process is time consuming, especially if you have lots of points of interest because you're coming up with the lore for each location. What I do generally is I don't come up with the lore for every location. I'll just put down POIs and then add lore later because lore is very, 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 very time consuming. So my suggestion would be is just start placing down the points of interest first, and then you can apply lore to it later. All right. Also, I discovered one complaints that we've had in the past is that players cannot see when I'm using key bindings, or not players, but users cannot see when I'm adding key bindings, and they cannot see when I'm using the mouse. I use OBS. OBS does not do mouse capture, but I discovered that there is a plugin that does let you capture the keys and the mouse. So I'll make sure in our next stream masterclass next week on Wednesday, hopefully we'll be able to incorporate all the keys as well, key capture as well as mouse capture, so you can see what I'm doing. This has been a big complaint that a lot of people have had, so I want you to know that we are listening to your complaints, and we're going to try to resolve this so that you can see both of those things. All right, I hope that you found this helpful. I really enjoyed this. We covered a lot. In future episodes, we will be adding tons of more points of interest. All right, so please have a great weekend, merry map making, and please stay safe and healthy. All right, take care, everyone. I'll see you next week. Enjoy the weekend.